For my assignment, I chose to develop a file system sensor. The sensor takes in a full file path parameter and returns the encoding used in that file. If no file exists at the given path, it returns the supplied file path along with a message saying that the file does not exist. To use the sensor, you simply type file encoding into the sensor field, and then it will default to the Windows system Notepad executable. And accepting that as a default, I'll run that on all machines in the system. As you can see, 2 systems so far have accepted the file and says it does exist and it is encoded using a CP1252 encoding that is standard to all English Windows systems. And then there is one system that says it does not exist. That would be likely a Linux operating system, so it would not contain the Notepad executable or the Windows directory. Now looking at the actual code of my sensor, I can filter and go by student as my username. It starts by importing the Tanium library and then defines the clean path function. This function uses its own codec and changes the URL encoded file path given by the parameter from the file path parameter in this sensor, and then transforms it to an ASCII encoding. It does this character by character and then recognizes a % as a URL encoded character, and then from that point on it references the codec dictionary and transforms that character into its associated character. After cleaning the path, you get the originally inputted file path from the user, and now you can try and reference that file by opening it, and if that fails, it throws a file not found error and returns a file does not exist message. That is what would be seen by the user, and then that is what's seen with the Linux operating system in my previous example. If the file does exist, it returns the file encoding along with the result message. And then the parameter input is just one parameter, and it is a file path parameter with this following configuration. I originally intended to make a sensor that detects personally identifiable information within a file, but ran into some issues with reading the file. I was able to execute the script locally and it worked as intended. So if I supply this script with a path to the file that I would originally intend to use, or it detects the information using several different regular expressions, as can be seen right here. It contains the same clean path function as used in my previous example, and same codec and same general functionality. The only difference between this script is that it runs locally and therefore does not use the Tanium library. It runs using system arguments and references through the command line interface. And then after the path has been cleaned and the regular expressions have been defined, it iterates through each of the regular expressions and then targets the specified file and then references each regular expression and tries to match it for results within that file. If there were any matches, it will append a new entry to the results dictionary, the key being the name of the regular expression and the actual value being the number of matches given with that regular expression. At the end of the for loop, after every regular expression has been reviewed, if there are no matches, it will say no PII found, no personally identifiable information was located in the file, so there is nothing to be displayed. Else it would just print the key name and the results key. So the results with that key would just be the number of matches, and that is what would be shown to the user. If this were to be run as a Tanium script, all print functions would just be replaced with tanium.results.add. That would make it so that it would show up in the Tanium console. However, I had issues running the read function for the file, as well as importing the read library, and originally I had some issues importing the URL lib. Using the codec right here in the clean path function, instead of using the URL library from Python, has proved to be a little bit more beneficial than negative, because it does not require the extensive library of URL lib to be imported, and that would take up a lot more storage space. Doing it this way proved a lot more lean and more effective at just doing it in an efficient manner. If executed, it would look something like this, and then works relatively quickly, locates a few credit card numbers and a couple IP addresses, as well as social security numbers within the file. And that is what I originally intended to do for my sensor, but I ran into some issues, and therefore I went with the file encoding as my approach. I really enjoyed working with the Tanium platform overall. I found the way that it is able to run a script on such a large amount of devices simultaneously very powerful. I had some issues determining which Python libraries were supported, and to my understanding so far and research, I have not found any new documentation that tells me what libraries are included with Python. I am unsure why I ran into issues with reading the file in Python and found no other articles or documentation regarding this issue as well. I felt like that should be a relatively simple thing, but may have been an issue on my side, and I don't quite understand why I couldn't read the file. As you can see in my sensor code, I had no problem opening the file right here, and that is how I get the encoding of the file. But if I were to attempt to read the file, this exact file object, then it would not execute properly. I looked on the Tanium GitHub account and found several different scripts and APIs, but I found no documentation pertaining to the Tanium library. So it was a little bit difficult to find other scripts or other functions in that library that may have been useful for my problem. It was very difficult for me originally to try and import other Python libraries, so I believe that a virtual environment feature would be really useful with these with each script or sensor, because then I could import specific libraries for this sensor that weren't used in other sensors, such as Paperclip if I were trying to access the clipboard object on each endpoint or something of that nature. I'm not sure if this is plausible, but I believe that it would be a great way to make it easier to import external libraries. To my knowledge, this is not a feature that exists yet. Although I did not work a lot with the package feature, I worked a little bit when I was researching, trying to find out what libraries are supported. So I looked through the Python library, Python packages, my bad, and I saw that there are a few different tools that you import, and I was unable to find out which Python libraries were installed. I believe I would be able to find that with more research, but up to this point I have not discovered that part of the package. It is clear that you can do a lot more with a package than with a sensor, so this may have been a better approach for the personal information script that I attempted to develop. Perhaps I could have ran that script in the background using a package and then referenced it using a sensor. That may have been a much better way of going about that problem than the way I originally did. In conclusion, Tanium is a very useful and extensive platform. I am very excited to learn more about the platform and become more skilled at using its many features. I can see the many possibilities for scripts that I could develop with more experience on the platform. Thank you for your time.